We all have our own path to walk. It may be obstructed, it may be winding, and no doubt it will have peaks and valleys, but it is ours alone. Like onlookers at a marathon, friends and family can offer encouragement along the way, but ultimately we decide the trajectory that we take. In this series, Juliet Doris Williams offers a clear view from her path that may inform your decisions as you move toward finding your faith. One part spirituality, one part real-world practicality, and a serious splash of fun. Here's Juliet.
Hi, I'm Juliet, and welcome to Finding Faith. I'm the author of 2 books, one of which is Leaving Church, Finding Faith, 6 Steps for Discovering Your Purpose in the World After Leaving the Christian Church, and the primary focus of this podcast. You can find both books and how to contact me on my website at julietdoriswilliams.com. And I am here in this space chatting with you about the book and other things that may bubble up when we are talking about faith and life and how those two things intersect. Because if you are at all like me, they always intersect. Hello there, friends. We are back from a little break. Glad you are listening. Over the past months, you've been listening only to my voice here on the Finding Faith podcast. With this episode, we are going to change it up a little and invite different voices into this space to talk with us about life with faith as the ever-present backdrop. Not everyone that we talk to will have done the leaving church part, but all will have their own story to share about how their relationship with church institution has impacted them. So, first up at bat is my very good friend, Derrick J. Kirkland. Derrick is an Ohio certified peer recovery supporter. He is super involved in his community, particularly his peer recovery community. He is a trainer, an online peer support group facilitator, a 12-step sponsor, and so much more. And full disclosure, we also work together. So he's doing great and wonderful things at the agency that we both call home. But today, we are taking off all our hats and simply being in this space as brother and sister travelers on the way. So welcome to Finding Faith podcast, Derrick. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for the invitation, Juliet.
Oh, thank you for agreeing. So Derrick, when I first shared with you that I had written this book, you were one of the first people to let me know that you wanted this book and not the ebook, because I tried to get you to go to get the ebook. You were adamant about wanting the print book and for me to let you know when it was published. And frankly, that was some motivation for me to get the process done because I was completely off my timeline for publishing the print book. So thank you for that. But when I got the print version done and finally had it in stock, I made sure that you got your copy and you gave me some immediate heartfelt feedback about it. So what was it that you found so compelling about the topic?
The topic was so compelling because of the pros and cons that had to be weighed prior to exiting the church. Also, you spoke about the institution of the church versus the community of the church. And it hit me like a ton of bricks because for years, I thought I had a lot of religion per se, but I found out later that I didn't need a quantity of religion. I needed a quality of religion. And so I didn't get that till later on until I found myself in the 12-step program and found the true meaning of what recovery and spirituality is.
So that's interesting, the qualitative versus the quantitative. Can you say more about that?
Yes, because I did a lot of church hopping and a lot of Bible study and Sunday school and things of that nature, but a lot of it just didn't resonate. I was just in motion, going from this church to that church, being a part of this congregation or that congregation. and things were always up and down and changing until I had an opportunity just to be still. Scripture talks about being still and know that He's God, and I got there when I finally surrendered. You mentioned in your book about surrendering, surrendering, the familiar term of people of faith. And I didn't grasp that until I found myself in recovery. That I had to concede to my innermost self that I am who I am, and the things that were going on in my life was not of God. And so I had to surrender to those things and turn my will, my life over to His care.
So sounds like similar story about I realized actually long before I actually left church, I realized that I was doing a lot of church rather than being church. Mm-hmm. And those are two very different distinctions, doing church versus being church, or being the church, as we know. So you've mentioned recovery and how that impacted your journey. Can you share with us more about that and the connection with your recovery and your spirituality?
Yes, I remember a song that speaks of drawing me near the old rugged cross, and what my recovery has done is drawn me nearer to God, drawn me nearer to building a better relationship with God as I understand Him and not as the institution understands Him.
Wow. And do you have, because I know we talked about, the stuff that you do out in the community, your 12-step groups. So do you talk about that and how that maybe integrates all those two things? How do you talk to your fellow other travelers on the recovery way? How do you talk to them about that?
I share with them about the spirituality of recovery, having that personal relationship with God, because a lot of people think God is way out somewhere, way out in the universe somewhere. My God is right here.
Yeah.
Arm's reach. He's right here.
Yeah.
Omnipotent, omnipresent God is the one that I serve. And so I share with them that stories I had along the way. A gentleman by the name of Mr. Clarence Williams, Reverend Clarence Williams, 40 years sober and Alcoholics Anonymous. I stumbled into a room, and I know it was divine intervention because he sat me down and he shared with me his story, his journey, his alcoholism, and how he had been shot, stabbed. He opened up his robe sitting at his dining room table, and he cried tears. He cried tears while doing God's bidding, carrying the message to me, who was still suffering from drug alcoholism and mental illness. And he said, Derrick, quit playing with God before He takes His hands off of you. This is a gentleman who had gone to treatment 4 times, who used to sleep on the church steps where he became an associate pastor of. And it just happened. It was so spiritual. If I would have known it was his apartment, I probably would have gone the other way. But I was with a friend. And so God set me down in front of Mr. Clarence Williams to share that with me, because he had to protest against the organization at a renowned treatment center here, men's treatment center here in Columbus, Ohio, called the House of Hope, to have God mentioned in recovery. Just God spiritually in recovery, because they didn't want any connection with just God in their organization during that time. And so they've been around since the 50s. But yeah, that gentleman became the head counselor of the House of Hope.
That's
Mr.
awesome.
Clarence Williams. Yes.
That's awesome.
And so, yes.
And our listeners may not. We're well versed in, steeped in nonprofit world, and so nonprofits like ours and some like not like ours struggle with how to talk about God and how to talk about spirituality in a way that is safe for everyone and welcoming. I think we figured that out at our agency. So I think we figured that out and we've got that down. So, but I understand, and I've been a part of those conversations too. So back to the church part, what challenges were you experiencing? You said that you did a lot of church hopping.
Well, yeah, just to find my fit, did I want to be in the bench choir? Did I want to become a deacon, or do I want to be an usher? Where did I fit in the church, or did I just want to be within the congregation and just be a member? So I found a church after I surrendered, and it was the Salvation Army organization, and I found myself and I found my place in that church, and they didn't have a great expectation of me. They were just happy that I was there, a part of their organization, and so I started a breakfast ministry in that church, and it lasted 7 years prior to COVID. Yeah, and so I really found my groove. If you want to say, my groove in that church where I could receive the spirituality that I needed to connect with God, because I didn't have to become a theologian. I didn't have to do that, because at one time I thought that was the expectation. Derek, you need to know every verse. You need to know every book from, front to back. And so I found myself lost because I was church hopping, so I didn't grasp that understanding. And so I got there and I had an opportunity to read the Bible from cover to cover. We had this handout that they gave you, and you can read a portion of the Bible daily until you get to the end, from the Old Testament through the New Testament.
Yeah, I've taken that journey a couple times, so very, very insightful.
Yeah.
So you mentioned COVID. We were going to talk about COVID a little later, but since you brought it up, I need to tell you, you don't know this, but I started this podcast right at the height of COVID last summer, summer of 2020. And so occasionally it feels like the COVID Chronicles, because so when I'm talking about, life, real life, then this is what real life looks like right now. And we cannot ignore COVID in this real life, because it is all of our lives. We're all impacted by it. And so how you said you were doing your breakfast ministry until COVID hit. So how has your church journey, your faith journey, how has that been impacted by COVID?
Well, it has been impacted, but I had to hold on, being that all the recovery places had shut down, church had shut down. Everyone was either on Zoom or YouTube or Facebook Live, having church service. And after using church and 12 step to grow spiritually, I felt that disconnection. It's something about being in person. It's something about being able to embrace the parishioners and your brothers and sisters in Christ, or those who are in 12 step, to be able to shake their hand or even to embrace them, because we were on the same journey and we just felt like family. And I didn't have to be the square peg trying to fit in a round hole. I fit because of being there and present and being loved and giving love. So it has. But in the Big Book by Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill W. talks about when World War II took place and the AAers went off to war, and they all came back sober. And so I had to hold on to the faith, the things hoped for, things unseen, that I had with the humility and gratitude that had been given to me on the spiritual journey. So I had to hold on to that and do what I can and could do, rather than jumping outside the bounds of spirituality and sobriety and my connection with the God of my understanding. So I held on to those two things, humility and gratitude. And to continue to work with others, if it was just in a circle, my sponsor, my co-workers, or the guys who I sponsor even, and my church members who are always in connection with me online, text or phone calls. Yeah.
So is it still? I mean, we're not out of COVID yet. So is it still that way? Are you still meeting in online or
Well, no,
otherwise, but not in person?
I had started attending my wife's church, and they're back in the church with social distancing, the way the seating is arranged.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and just so recently I have decided not to attend because I felt spiritually in conflict with what's going on within my marriage and the church. And so I had to step out. Today I walk by faith. I still get phone calls from old parishioners from the Salvation Army because I
Sure.
was just supposed to have just gone away to do other work outside of the Salvation Army and then come back. And they had me in like a watch night type thing and to make sure I was okay. So Brother Dennis, who was a member of, he met with me at a meeting out on McKinley Avenue. And so we had an opportunity to talk about coming back to the Salvation Army. Yeah.
And so challenge this. So I'm there's challenge here for you with your conflict and challenge with your expression of faith, maybe, or not so much your sense of faith, but your expression of faith. Can you say more about that?
About my expression of faith.
Mm-hmm.
My faith is connected to individuals who have since gone on to glory. Reverend Leroy C. Bush, he was a pastor of mine, and for the first time in my life, I connected with a minister as his brother instead of as his parishioner. He pulled me aside one day and we prayed together, and he let me know. He said, first, I'm your brother in Christ Jesus, not your pastor.
Wow.
And so that connected me that to see this gentleman who is from Columbus, Ohio, and played in the Columbus Negro Baseball League here, and to share with me who he is to me, and the same level that we were on in Christ Jesus was just so awesome. It just sealed that faith because this same gentleman came out into the community to find me, to find his sheep when I was lost.
Wow.
Yes, he came out knocking on those doors where the things were going on in those places of ill repute to get his brother out and to take his brother and clean him up and to bring him back home. Yes.
So that's both doing church and being church. That's the same thing right there.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's awesome. So what I mean, and you probably said this, but I'm going to ask it in a different way. What feeds you? What feeds your faith? Are there any helpful faith practices that you particularly embrace?
Keep a song in your heart. Grandmother and them used to always say, keep a song in your heart. And my favorite song is, if it had not been for the Lord on my side. It comes out of Psalms, but someone turned it into a gospel song. Where would I be? Where would I be if it had not been for the Lord on my side?
Wow.
And so, yeah.
So song, so music. Yeah.
That I keep in my heart. My automobile radio is always on the spiritual channel. I've had to disconnect myself for various reasons so that I wouldn't be triggered or different things of that nature because of where I come from and being on the journey that I'm on. I had to leave some things behind. Yeah.
So has part of the COVID question that I asked earlier also was I was going to ask you about the social unrest that has also been like the twin events, if I can, they're not even events because they're just ongoing right now. How has that, I mean, those things have just come alive this year, rather, I guess now we're in the second year of all of that. So how has that impacted you and your life, your faith, your journey?
Well, it may sound like an oxymoron, but COVID has been a blessing to keep individuals in because of the civil unrest and the things that were going on. I was triggered. My pastor, my former Salvation Army pastor, she's down at the Dayton Croc Center. Her name is Swetha Vincent, Captain Swetha Vincent. She called me, and she called me praying with me. She called me thanking me for being the African American male who was her parishioner at one time, who was a part of her spiritual growth at one time. She just called crying and praying and thanking God for myself and Brother Dennis. And so, yeah, I got triggered, and I was triggered because I had to reflect all the way back to 1985 when my uncle was killed by the Atlanta Police Department. And even further back than that, when I was a child, a lot of different things were happening here in Columbus. Police brutality was at an all-time high coming out of the early 70s into the middle 70s because there was a guy by the name of Machine Gun Morgan who was shot up in elementary school that had been burglarized by some teenagers. And one had become my barber, and he still had the scar of the bullet that grazed his temple. Mm-hmm. And the same individual attacked a family at a very with a 5-star restaurant here in Columbus called the Kahiki. And Machine Gun Morgan was part of that, a brutal beating that they placed upon the individuals. There was a family, including a baby, that was in the arms of his mother that she dropped in that store because they just wanted to have their bill itemized. And the police were called, and they were brutally beaten right there in the restaurant. And so these things had become secondary traumas for me because I was there. I was the kid that watched TV, that watched news all the time, and that read the newspaper, and all this stuff was just here. And so when it happened to my uncle, it was just something that just resonated in my spirit that could have been me. Or even today, it can be me. So therefore, I'm still, I am still, I go to work, I come home, I participate. If there's a meeting that one want me to call out and speak to, or I'll talk to individuals on the phone, but I do not go out and about too much after work unless it's necessary. And there's a dear friend of mine. He's on the corner of Main and Hamilton, or Broad and Hamilton, and he's protesting against the police brutality. He was standing up against our president and his rhetoric, and he has a microphone and speakers and everything set up. And so, yeah, I've been triggered. The 1969 riots. I started, a gentleman was his paper boy. He was murdered on the porch of a gentleman's dry cleaners because his 2 girls were playing on the man's front porch. And so he came around to see what was going on, and the man shot him with a shotgun, and then stood over and shot him again with the shotgun. And so I come home from football practice, and Main Street from Parsons Avenue to Nelson Road, almost in Bexley, was just lined up with people protesting against the murder. And the 1969 riot started from there. So I remember the National Guard telling us we couldn't sit on our front porch, and tear gas smell was throughout the neighborhood in the air, and things of that nature were going on. Yeah. So
my goodness. Yeah. Gosh, you've taken us down a road here. When you first began talking about the secondary trauma, I don't believe that people who are not African American, not Black folk, I don't know that they understand the trauma of being Black in this country and the experiences, the shared cultural experiences that we have, I mean, it's not like 100% of us, but it is the vast majority of us, East Coast, West Coast, North, South, the experience is the same. There are similar experiences that we have, that we share in this country. And there's a whole conversation, and we're not going to solve it here. That's just going to take us down a whole other rabbit hole, talking about how the church has been that steady, stalwart presence for us, and it speaks to why the church has been so important, still is so important for a great many. I think, and of course, I wrote this book about leaving church, and that's a whole other story. But it does have something to do with the foundation, because I'm not per se in church anymore, but the church is really I'm just walking around with it because it's inside me. It's foundational. It is foundational. When I promote the podcast, I use the hashtag churchy girl. And I've said that before in the podcast. I'm still a churchy girl. I'm just not in the church building. I'm not in church institution, but I'm still hashtag churchy girl. Yeah. And how I don't know that people in general understand how foundational and healing, just that coming together process has been for Black folks in the U.S. And so there's a whole other, and I'm sure there's a myriad of podcasts and books that have been written, I'm certain of it, about this journey that Black people have been on, and our very close relationship with church. And I'm going to say church institution. I'm going to say church otherwise. So church universal also. Yeah. So that's a whole other story. But I will say for both of us that in times of trouble, it was church that helped us survive. Yeah. We survived. Yeah. So, and so, yeah, right there with you, right there with you. So, what else? Anything else you want to say?
I can remember when the church was the focal point of our community, and everything took place. When you socialized, there were church events that you socialized and participated in, even to
the only safe place. Safe places where we could do those things.
But here's a concern of mine, is that church has not made their way back out into the community. They've gone inside, and inside it's just to those who are sitting in the pews. And we need more outreach. We need more churches to step out. Christ was among the people.
Yep.
He was not in the temple. He may have visited the temple, but he preached out among the people. He healed among the people. Okay, so that's just how I feel. We need to get back out in the community and get connected with the community instead of being behind closed doors.
Well, that's I think you summarized my book. So a little bit there. So that's kind of where my journey is right now. So that's fascinating that we would come back to that point. So, but you're absolutely right. So, because doing church is out here, out there, in the world. It's not within the four walls of the building. And so, and I would go so far as to say that I think that what we do at our agency is a lot of doing church, even though we absolutely do not call it that.
That's right.
We don't call it that at all, but we are out there being the church for the people that we serve. And so, yeah, hey, this is great. This was great. So one last time, anything else you want to say to our Finding Faith listeners?
Well, the Finding Faith listeners is find your place in this world to do God's bidding. I feel as though it was divine intervention that I have an opportunity to work for the organization that I do work for, because I get to be of maximum service to those who visit and participate our center, and to God. And so I'm so forever grateful.
Same.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
So very inspiring, Derrick, and I cannot thank you enough for being on the launch pad of this new phase of Finding Faith and being ever so patient with me as we worked out all of the details. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's all for now, friends. Thanks for listening. Until next time, this is Finding Faith.